$1 million used to be the finish line, the number every Aussie chased, the sign that life had finally worked out. But something strange has happened to that number in 2026, and once the truth sinks in, the whole picture of wealth in this country starts to look very different. Right now, the median home value across Australia's capital cities sits at around 1.16 million. Sydney is near 1.28 million for a median home, though prices there have actually dropped by about $48,000 since January. Brisbane has crossed 1.12 million. Perth sits near 1.05 million. So before a single dollar is spent on furniture, food, or a holiday, that $1 million dream in half the country buys a median home and nothing else. Let's walk through what that million actually gets across the country in 2026, because the gap between cities is bigger than most people expect, and it changes how the whole retirement conversation should sound. Start in Sydney. $1 million will not buy a freestanding house within 20 kilometres of the CBD in most postcodes. What it buys instead is a two-bedroom apartment in suburbs like Marrickville, Ashfield, or parts of the lower North Shore. If the goal is a house with a backyard, that million pushes the search out to the western suburbs past Blacktown or south toward Campbelltown. The number that once meant luxury in Sydney now means giving something up. A long drive to work, a smaller home, a mortgage that still runs for decades if the deposit is anything less than half. Sydney buyers have learned to push back on price, wait for the right listing, and think in 30-year timeframes rather than 5-year ones, because the market rarely rewards being in a rush. Move down to Melbourne, and the story shifts. Melbourne has been the softer capital, with a median home value sitting around $820,000. $1 million here still carries real weight. That budget opens the door to a 3-bedroom house in suburbs like Reservoir, Preston, or Coburg. Head further out to Frankston or Werribee, and the same money buys a modern family home with land, a driveway, and room to breathe. Melbourne is one of the few capitals where $1 million still feels like $1 million. For buyers who missed the Sydney window years ago, Melbourne has become the smart backup plan, and many experts believe the current dip in prices will not last much longer. Brisbane has become the surprise story of the decade. 5 years ago, $1 million in Brisbane bought a riverside home with a pool. Today, with a median around 1.12 million, that same budget buys a solid 4-bedroom house in the middle ring, places like Chermside, Wavell Heights, or Carina. The Sunshine State has caught up to the southern capitals, and the days of Brisbane being the cheap option are gone. People moving from other states, the coming 2032 Olympics, and a real shift in how Australians think about lifestyle have all pushed Brisbane into a new tier for good. Perth has run hard as well. The mining boom, population growth, and a tight rental market have pushed the median just above $1 million. What that money buys in Perth is a comfortable family home in suburbs like Bassendean, Willetton, or parts of the northern beaches. Perth still gives you more house per dollar than Sydney, but the gap has closed fast, and anyone hoping to buy in Perth on a modest budget is now looking at a very different market than the one their parents remember. Adelaide, with a median around 950,000, is now firmly in the same conversation as the bigger capitals. $1 million in Adelaide still buys a truly lovely home. Think character houses in Prospect, family homes in Glenelg, or newer builds in the eastern suburbs. Adelaide has become one of the strongest performing markets in the country, and that million goes noticeably further than it does in Sydney or Brisbane. Buyers who took the leap on Adelaide 5 years ago are sitting on gains that have genuinely changed their lives. Hobart has changed faster than almost anywhere else in the country. A decade ago, $1 million in Hobart bought a waterfront estate. Today, with inner city medians crossing the $1 million mark, that budget buys a comfortable but not fancy home in suburbs like Sandy Bay, Battery Point, or West Hobart. The Tasmanian dream has become expensive, and the locals feel it every time a mainland buyer walks through an open home. Rentals are tight, wages have not kept up, and the housing affordability chat in Tasmania is now one of the sharpest in the country. Then there's Darwin, which is still the outlier. With a median home value around $622,000, $1 million in Darwin genuinely buys something special. A large family home, a swimming pool, tropical gardens, and often water views. For anyone happy to deal with the heat and the distance, Darwin is the last capital city where a seven-figure budget still buys a seven-figure lifestyle. The trade-off is a smaller job market and a way of life that suits some people far more than others, but for the right buyer, Darwin offers a version of Australian living that has almost vanished elsewhere. And Canberra sits in the middle. $1 million buys a comfortable four-bedroom home in suburbs like Canberra, Gungahlin, or the older parts of Belconnen. Canberra rewards patient buyers, and the public sector wages that support the market mean prices tend to hold steady through the ups and downs that shake other capitals. It's not a city that produces huge gains, but it rarely produces big losses either, and for a certain kind of investor, that steady ride is worth more than any boom. Now zoom out from bricks and mortar because $1 million in property is only one version of this story. The more interesting question is what happens when that million never goes into a house at all. $1 million spread across Australian shares, international ETFs, and a small slice of bonds can realistically produce a gross yield of somewhere between 4 and 5% per year. That works out to roughly $40,000 to $50,000 in yearly income before tax. Add franking credits from Australian dividends, and the after-tax figure often lands close to a modest full-time wage. That's not wealth beyond imagination. That's replacement income. That's the freedom to stop trading hours for dollars without ever needing to touch the money underneath. And unlike a house, that portfolio does not need repairs, tenants, insurance costs that climb every year, or a phone call at midnight about a broken hot water system. Compare that to the retirement chat happening across the country. The Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia suggests a single retiree needs around $630,000 for a comfortable retirement at 67, as long as they own their home outright. A couple needs closer to $730,000 combined. So $1 million in super for someone starting retirement without a mortgage is genuinely enough to live well, travel, eat out, help the grandkids. The number people fear is not actually as far away as the headlines suggest. And for anyone still 20 or 30 years from retirement, the maths gets even friendlier once compounding is given room to do its work. Here's the part that matters most. The value of $1 million is not fixed. It shifts with the city, with the decade, with the choices made around it. Someone with $400,000 in super, a paid-off home in Adelaide, and a small share portfolio may be living a wealthier life than someone with $1 million mortgage in Sydney and nothing left over each month. There's also the emotional side of this that rarely gets talked about. $1 million in the wrong setup can feel like pressure. $1 million in the right setup feels like permission. Permission to say no to work that drains you. Permission to spend time with family without watching the clock. Permission to make choices from a place of freedom rather than fear. So if the goal is $1 million, keep chasing it. Just chase it with a plan for what each dollar will do once it lands. Whether that's a home, an income stream, a retirement cushion, or a mix of all three, the million only means something when it's given a job. If this breakdown made the picture clearer, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.